Hi, welcome back to my channel, and in this video I am going to be sharing my thoughts about this book. And I had originally purchased it to go along with Reading Between the Lines Club Choice, and there's a complete playlist that I will leave linked down in the description box below. I did not get this done in time to upload with everybody, but I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions because I think this book deserves its own video. So let's get started. We had a list of 10 questions to answer for this book, and I'm just going to leave those linked down below, but I'm just going to be sharing my heart in this book. This book, I live with somebody that has mental illness, or I'm not... It's really hard to call it mental illness because I know what they're saying, but it's so much more than that. It's trying to help somebody live each day, and mental illness almost has a stigma that it's not really the same as any other illness, but for us going through it, it's a lot like that. And when I began this book, it was at a really rough season, and I knew I was going to need to take my time on it. Sheila Walsh is the author of In the Middle of the Mess, Strength for This Beautiful Broken Life. And this book is basically her coming out that as a prominent Christian figure, she wrestled with suicidal thoughts and ended up being committed to a psychiatric ward. And basically she goes through a lot about Christianity and dealing with this and some of the stigma that's in it. And this is one of those few books that I read and wept, because while I haven't personally dealt with any of this, living with somebody that does, it was like somebody was sharing what we have to go through that maybe we can't necessarily share or talk about. And that's what I loved best about this book. It was like somebody understands. And as much as you try to describe, you still hold back a ton of information about what it's like. And so she nailed it. She was able to say it. And I don't recommend books all the time to people, but I would recommend this to Christian and non-Christian alike, because this is what our life is like. And if you want to understand it, this would be a perfect way to do so. There wasn't anything about it that I disliked other than the fact that this is written from a woman's perspective, and I have a husband, a man that's going through severe clinical depression. And so sometimes the suggestions of finding a buddy group or some women to talk to about is not going to necessarily work for our family. It's not that I disagree with it, but men don't open up normally to begin with. They're not chatty like females. And one of the things my husband deals with is anxiety as well, so definitely not opening up to females. And he confides in me, and I share his secrets, but he probably would not do that with anybody else. There's so much wrapped up into this book, but one thing that just kept bringing me back to the heart of it is that Christianity is a quote from her, and already I've committed it to heart, but Christianity is a hospital for the broken, not a museum for the perfect. And I thought that was so beautiful. And there's so much more. I have a whole notebook written of thoughts and pain and suffering. And the hardest thing about reading this book is that you want to go and you want to just fix everything, because that's what I am. I'm a fixer, and I can't. And it's like, that's okay, you know, she's still going through this, she's working through this. And even my husband, sometimes he would see me just be working on something and not paying attention, which isn't normally like me. And he'll come over and he would read over my shoulder, and he would stay there. Like, most of the time he just can't continue reading, but it was like somebody else was understanding him. And it wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty, and I don't try to deliberately lay stuff out for him that never works. And she addressed that even in here. But it was just a beautiful idea that just because we have doubts doesn't mean that we're not saved by grace. And just because we have fears doesn't mean we're not a Christian. And just because we have to struggle with this every single day doesn't mean that we're not a Christian. And that was really refreshing to read, especially because we are, maybe it's just within our own town, but we are in such a town that's like, okay, you have to take this oil, or you're not praying hard enough, you don't have enough faith, or just there's so much more. And it's like, you know, how much do we have to do to earn God's pleasure? You know, Luther dealt with that, and we're Lutheran, so of course I have to pull him up. But there's so many people in history that dealt with that, you know, how much is good enough for God, and the reality is, you know, it's not about that. It's about that we needed God, and this is a perfect example of that. But you can't make anybody see that. And just because they can't see like you can see doesn't mean that it's not true. In my box swap that I recently got, I got another book by Sheila Walsh from the gifter, and I'll try to leave that linked above if I remember. So this is the first book that I've ever read by her, and I'm currently reading that other book. It's basically all about, it's kind of like a Hallmark book. It really makes me think of something that Hallmark would have done. So it's interesting for me to kind of go from something so raw and sharing some of the brokenness in the beauty of life kind of idea, and then going and reading about this woman dealing with the death of her sister and angels. And for some reason I didn't put together that the authors were the same, but it really surprised me that she could go from fiction and nonfiction really, really well, and with a really good transition. So I know there's just not a whole lot that I've really shared with that. I was trying to share some of my highlights, some of the things that I wish they would have maybe expounded a little bit more on, questions I still had, things that maybe I didn't so much like about it. To be honest, I loved it so much that my immediate thought was, oh, I want to send this to a friend of mine. There's so much rawness in here. Not only did Sheila Walsh have to deal with her father committing suicide as a young girl, she got to experience that, but also the death of her mother. Kind of being in the Christian spotlight, I think, really puts a whole lot of pressure, especially when you deal with these things. There's just some things that she's really shared about to like help with coping, but I really like that she doesn't make this whole book about it. She does a really, really good job of sharing what it's like, and also truths to combat it for those that are going through it. So it's not just, you know, here's what I dealt with, and here's a list of resources to go and seek out help with. It's not just that. It's very short. I mean, see how it's not that big, but in it she puts God's truth in here, but she does it in a beautiful way. That's one of the things that I noticed right off the bat, is that she didn't just put truth, she shared who God was. And I believe that was even a quote that I had written down because I thought that was so poignant. Focus more on who God is as somebody that loves us, and not what we have to do and what we're not doing and things like that. Like, she really, really did a good job. But I hope that was adequate, and it doesn't feel like adequate at all. It's not a really adequate book review on this, I have to say. I did make a Goodreads review for this book, and I will leave it linked down below. And in there, in the Goodreads review, is like quotes and different things that I really think is going to be valuable to somebody kind of looking this up. I picked this up secondhand for, I think it was less than $5, so it's not that expensive to get, and I would recommend it so much to put on your shelf. to even have an extra copy to give out and pass around, which I think I would like to actually do. So I hope this video gave you an idea of something else to read, especially when it comes to mental illness within the Christian church. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart, and I would love to be a part of piecing back together our lives and not building more walls up, so to speak. And I really think that this book was inspirational and helpful for that. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to check the playlist that will be linked down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!